If I could, Regional Housing Mandate Committee into session. All right.
Coleman. Here. Price. Sharp.
Here.
Schmidt.
Here.
Tom. Here. Mitchell. Michael.
Here.
Pfeiffer.
Thank you. Councilmember Price visiting newborn grant in New York. Let's see. I don't have any requests to speak for the open part of the meeting, so we will move on to the agenda. There has been a suggestion that we start the agenda with item number 2, which is the description of meetings in the future. It gives us a chance to outline where the committee is and where it is going. So it seems reasonable that we start with that. And Hillary, do you want to introduce that?
I'd be happy to. I'm Hillary Gittleman, the planning director, and I'm joined by Tim Wong on our staff. We're going to both chip in here. The intention of this item was just to update you on events that have transpired since the last committee meeting, and then to share with you the revised schedule moving forward. And we actually have a revision since the packet was prepared, which we've distributed, and I hope you have. And we'll walk through that in a minute. But just before Tim does that, let me just highlight what's occurred since we last met. We've secured the services of a consultant, MIG Consulting, and we had a kickoff meeting with them, and then they came and attended the first meeting of the community panel. So we've sent out invitations to the community panel. I would say all but 1 or 2 of the seats are now filled, and we I realize that this information is not on the website, but another thing we've done is establish a web page for the housing element update, and we're starting to get all the material related to it on the website. We brought hard copies of the roster of the committee. If maybe we should pass those around. If you're interested in the composition of the panel thus far. It was a great meeting earlier this week, but it wasn't really focused on content. It was more kind of ground rules and getting the panel familiar with what our charge is and just what a challenge this is going to be to get this done by January. So just to reiterate, we've hired a consultant, we've empaneled the community panel and held the first introductory meeting. We are also working to schedule community workshops. In our staff report to you, we said they were scheduled for April 3rd and April 8th. We think we're going to push them to the end of the month just because things are happening so fast. We need a little more time to ensure that they're as effective as I think they need to be to kick off this process in the right way. So stay tuned for more definite dates later in April. We are also working on a collaboration with San Mateo County jurisdictions to undertake a nexus study related to housing impact fees. That's not directly related to the housing element, but I thought the committee would like to be aware of that because ultimately it'll result in staff bringing a recommendation to the council on impact fees, probably after the housing element process. Or it may be concurrent. I mean, we'll have to see what the timeline of that project is. Anyway, maybe Tim can walk us through the revised schedule that we handed out to you today.
Yeah. Thank you, Hillary. Tim Wong, I'm a senior planner with Planning and Community Environment. I believe you, Councilman.
If I might, when you're going through this, and thank you for the update, when you're going through this, if you could indicate what's different, that would be great.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'll go through the main changes. As Hillary had previously mentioned, one of the main changes was we had originally scheduled the community workshops with the consultant to be scheduled April 3rd and April 8th. But as Hillary said, those have been pushed or later in the month of April. In addition, the other change is that we now are proposing a May 19th City Council study session. That study session is we anticipate that an administrative draft will be completed by late April, early May, and hopefully we can take that administrative draft and have the council take get a first look at the administrative draft. In addition, another change that we had made was originally we had scheduled the community panel to make a recommendation to the RHMC in late September, but that has been pushed to or rescheduled for late August, since the RHMC will be making its final recommendation in October. So to give the community panel plenty of time, and for the RHMC to consider the community panel's recommendations based on the reviewed draft. In addition, as Hillary said, the city's housing element update website is up, and at the very end of the schedule is the address, the website address. On the website, you will find the listings of the community panel meetings and the RHMC schedule, in addition to some FAQs and other resources that the general public can access.
Where is the website?
Oh, it's on the attachment yes. Yeah. So, oh, sure.
And if I can add one more thing, a couple of the changes we made to the work plan are in direct response to some input we received. Chair Schmid had recommended the study session. We had an informational report to council somewhere on the schedule, and the chair recommended that we add a study session to that to allow members of the council who are not on this committee to have an opportunity to comment on that administrative draft, which we thought had a lot of merit. In addition, the shift of the community panel's recommendation to August was really in response to input from the committee. The committee, the panel on earlier this week was concerned that they were simply making a recommendation to the Regional Housing Mandate Committee. They wanted to also make their recommendation before the Planning Commission, so the commission would have the benefit of their recommendation. So that's why that shift happened. But we'd be happy to answer any questions you have about this work plan schedule as it's been adjusted.
Great. Council members, questions? Councilmember Holmes.
I have one, and I appreciate that the May 19 meeting has been added, and it is as a study session. And the problem, if you've heard me say this several times before, the problem with study sessions is it just collective, individual comments, but there's no motion, there's no action to be taken, and this is a critical piece where there's not much time. So it seems to me that maybe it's a study session, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's an item as opposed to a study session, or it's a study session immediately followed by an item. So just to give clear guidance.
Would you like a response? I mean, I think we could consider that. It's a little early in the process to be getting down to action. I think our objective was simply to make sure that the full council is conversant in the issues that this committee is considering.
Councilmember Sharp?
Yeah, in thinking about that, I actually think we should do a study session. And if it seems that council thinks we're going down the wrong path at that point, we can always, you'll hear from council members about whether or not we should agendize. But I actually think if we don't have a study session, we put it for action, and people feel compelled to take action. And it is too early in the process. So I guess I just wanted to get a sense from you, where where you think the weaknesses are. I'm a little worried that, it seems really tight. Just getting that feeling. And we're already slipping the first meeting of the committee. I was a little concerned about that. Not for the specific slippage, but that obviously we can't have much slippage. Because if we do, we won't be that. So I guess I wanted to get a reaction to you about, what you think are the weaknesses in this, how you think we're going to keep it on track, and how we're going to basically get that message out. Because in Palo Alto, and I think typically the culture is that if we need more meetings, we have more. And I think we may need more meetings, but then I think you may need some, like if you have a committee meeting, the committee needs more meetings, you may have to have the following week and that kind of stuff. I think setting those expectations early on, and frankly, I think that's for this committee as well, not throwing out a month. So anyway, I just wanted to get your reaction to that.
Well, thank you for that question. I think there are opportunities all along here to fall off the trail we're on. But I think the biggest risk is when we submit when we do our first consultation with HCD and we actually start giving them material to review. If they come back with unanticipated questions or demands at that point, and that wouldn't be until late in the process. It would be early August or late July that we'd get their feedback, because we're not really thinking we'll be ready to submit something to them until early June. Oh no, it would be end of June. So, I mean, that's the biggest risk, because then we'll be scrambling in August as everybody's trying to adopt the final to make last minute changes.
Thank you.
Let's see. Mark, do you have a question? I have one public speaker, Herb Borak. Might be a good time.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Schmidt, and good afternoon. I have two comments. First is that the schedule should include the grace period, that we, in fact, it shows now as a deadline, a hard deadline of January 31st, but in fact it's May 31st. And so the way the schedule is set up is that it's set up for a decision to be made in November by the current council after the election happens, in city council election happens. And as Director Gittleman said, based upon the response from the state, it's possible that you'll be scrambling, or you will be scrambling if you feel you've got a hard deadline of January 31st. But in fact, there is a 120-day grace period. And if you omit that fact from all the schedules, it may be forgotten. And it's important, I think, that you really do have that time to make the best decision and not feel that you're forced to make a decision in November because you have a January 31st deadline. You don't. You have a May 31st deadline. The second comment is to please get the committee, the community panel list on the website as soon as possible, because there are already comments, at least on Palo Alto Online, of people wanting to know who it is based upon an article that was written using the list that was in progress that was attached to the report that you received in your packet, which was as of 9 days ago. So you can get that on and the link for people to find that. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Herb. A couple comments I have endorsed the changes that Hillary made. I think it's important that there be an exchange with the council as soon as we get into substantive issues. And the goal of that May meeting was to make sure that they had a chance to talk about it. 4 of the 9 members of the council are on this committee. So I think really it's an opportunity for the other 5 to give their inputs. And, I think they can do that in the context of a study session. And if we hear clearly from them that they want other sessions or an action session, we can work that in. I know the PTC is in the agenda on a regular basis, and I guess want to make sure your input, Mark, as to whether this is an agenda that the PCC can live with and that you are in the right places with the flow of information. And for the school district, I guess it's important to get input from them, but we're counting on you, Dana, and Heidi, I guess, to take this back to the school district and bring us the perspective or comments they might have. Karen?
Yeah, just a couple of other things. One is having this information on the website is great. Will meeting notifications also be pushed out? And the reason is because, we rely so much on the website, and it's great and very appropriate to have the information there, but people sometimes have to go there regularly and all the time to find out what's there. So if we can do a push out, also that's helpful, and to get more people aware and there. And I'm sure these will be public meetings, right? So that's one question.
We're talking about how to get the word out about these meetings, and we haven't determined the precise, mechanisms. But we definitely want to get spread the word and get more people to these meetings, so people who aren't on the panel can still participate and be part of this process.
And this is moving kind of quickly, but for the website, there will be continued modifications. One of them will be being able to sign up through the website to receive any future notices. I'll be compiling a database of all those who are interested in following community panel meetings and RHMC meetings, and any other subsequent housing element meetings with the council or with the PTC.
So maybe one way to do that was we have a PR person, so maybe the PR person could do a press release indicating that there's a way to sign up on the website for future notifications, one example. Then the other thing is about the community panel itself. So, and I don't think we usually do this, but it does cause me to think, is there good reason to have somebody who actually is a resident in an affordable housing project to be a community member at large? Somebody who lives in one of the Palo Housing Corp sites, or somebody like a BV resident, or somebody like that. It gives a different perspective on needs and that sort of thing. So did you consider that, and what do you think about that?
Well, we discussed the composition of the panel at the last committee meeting, and so we took what your input was at that meeting and ran with it. I think
we're not always that smart to think of everything at once.
I mean, the good thing is that these are public meetings, so even people who aren't impaneled are invited to participate. In fact, we had just a handful of people at the organizational meeting, and they were able to introduce themselves, and it was great. So I hope that we'll continue to get members of the public who aren't on the panel. And have a even wider variety of interests represented in the room as these discussions go forward.
So is it too late to add somebody, or how would you feel about that?
Well, we have a couple slots that haven't been filled, so in the next month we're going to have to strategize about that. If we fail to get the representatives for the categories as we've designed them, we'll have to think about changing the categories. But at this point, I want to start moving forward. We have to move fast and get rolling.
So as a follow-up to that, when you say categories haven't filled, that's a blank to it. And I actually would support Karen's suggestion, or a different suggestion, and strike Eden. Frankly, I don't think Eden does much at all know what they have done. It's very practical. We have the Palo Housing Corporation already there. Oh, sorry. We already have the Palo Alto Housing Corporation on here. I think they're basically duplicative of Palo Alto Housing Corporation. Is the group that provides affordable Palo Alto. So I think it's really important. I don't really see getting Eden. I think somebody else. I don't know if Karen's suggestion or whoever you think may be appropriate to get a more diverse group. I think you've done a pretty good job of getting a diverse group, but I think you did. And then I see we have Palantir on here. We might want to get a big research. There's a 2.5 million square feet in the park, roughly. We have a lot of big companies up there. SAP. I'm thinking one of those would bring that park, especially since we are looking at a lot of California. That's really what the park is for.
Council member and staff would appreciate if anybody knew of any contact names, because they are such large employers, to maybe be a little more responsive to an email if there's a contact name. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments? I guess what I get from this is thank you very much for the detailed outline of where we're going. I think we're all aware of the time deadlines that we face and that we want to move expeditiously through a number of separate operations that are going on every time. We want to take this seriously. And as I recall, we will have the opportunity at every meeting, there will be an agenda item on the upcoming schedule. Is that right? So that we can adapt and change as time goes on. Okay, that brings us then to item number 2 on the agenda.
Thank you, Hillary Gittleman, the planning director. Once again, I'd like to just do a brief introduction, and then Tim and his colleague have a great presentation for you. The only thing I will say is that if you compared this agenda item to one of the ones we discussed at our last meeting, you'll note that some of the numbers have changed. But luckily, they changed in the right direction. Tim and his colleagues have developed this great spreadsheet tool that they're going to share with you and explain further. It's started to be explained in the staff report. In the process of developing this tool, we determined that we were able to count more of our existing housing sites in the future housing element than we thought when we last talked. So we've identified a smaller delta, a smaller goal than we had originally, which I think is terrific news. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Tim to walk through a PowerPoint and a demonstration of this tool.
Thank you very much. So what we've designed is basically an interactive tool where the public can go out and select certain sites, if you will, to help get the city to meet our RHNA number. So to start, for the 2014-2022 RHNA, the city was assigned, or has been assigned, 1,988 units, and those are broken down into 4 income levels. Those 4 income levels have been listed in the staff report. Also, in addition to the 1,988 units, HCD generally requires that there be a surplus. And in the city of Palo Alto's instance, think it's about 200 units, 10% of the allocation, and that number is also based on our last experience with HCD. When we submitted the draft housing element, there was roughly a 200 unit surplus also proposed, and there was no question about that number. So just going ahead and using that 200 unit figure. Therefore, overall, the city needs to plan for approximately 2,188 units. So how do we get there? So starting off, again, there's our target of the 2,188. Having beaten the bushes a little harder, we can say that we can carry over 1,379 units from the identified sites in the 2007-2014 housing element. In addition, there are 399 units in the pipeline. Those are units or projects that are either getting their planning or building entitlements at this time. And we're talking between the period of 2014 to 2022. Of the 399, a large portion are the 250 units at the Mayfield through the Mayfield agreement, and also 3159 El Camino Real. That makes up about 300 of the 399 units. In addition, another 41 units were created from sites that were not on the inventory of sites. So if you subtract the 1379, the 399, and the 41 units, that gives us an unmet need of 389 units, much better than the previously stated 600, approximately 600 units. So the question is, where do we find those 389 units? As you'll see in the tool, we have ranked we have ranked 7 tiers in order of preference, if you will, path of least resistance. So tier 1 is second units. Currently, we are approving about 4 per unit. So over the 8-year span, we will have a potential of 32 units. We chose second units as tier 1 because they are by right. However, these 32 units would be categorized because of where rents are in the city. They would be categorized for moderate or above moderate income households. Tier 2 is the Fry's site. It's a 12.45 acre parcel that's zoned RM30, which that meets our realistic capacity. It exceeds our realistic capacity of 20 units, or default density, excuse me, of 20 units per acre. So it is a very good candidate. 75 units from this site have been identified in the 2007-2014, but again, using a realistic capacity of 20 units per acre, that would come out to 249. So therefore, we can use an additional 174 units from this site to apply towards that 389.
Could you just, Tim,
yeah.
go through that again? I'm
Sure.
unclear as to, it's zoned 30 units per acre, that's 300, I guess do that, 350 or 60 units, right?
Correct.
And why do we only get 174?
Oh, that's using the assumption at the realistic capacity or the default density of 20 units per acre.
Well, why do we use that?
We use that because...
Why not a site like this? Because this is different. This is really a different site. You're not going to be putting single family homes up there or
Could I interject? Isn't it 174 plus the 75 we've already counted?
Correct.
Gets to the
240.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Oh, okay.
So
Sorry.
So it's 249.
that's
Yeah,
right.
249, 20 times 12.45 gives 249.
So let me just step back and try and say this all another way, just to make it clear. So the Fry site is already identified on our housing inventory, but we didn't identify it at its maximum capacity because we were being conservative. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't want to put all our eggs in that basket. We're saying now, as part of Tier 2 and this housing element update, we could, if we chose, bulk up the site to its currently zoned maximum density.
I actually have a lot of questions on this issue. I'll come back to it.
Thank you, Hillary. So that is proposed for a Tier 2 site. And then for Tier 3, units on San Antonio, those parcels that have been zoned CN and CS. Actually, of the 15 parcels, one is zoned CN and the remaining are zoned at CS. These units were chosen because in the CS zoning, you have a maximum of 30 dwelling units per acre. Again, it exceeds the city's default density for HCD purposes. Also, residential use as part of a mixed-use development is already allowed by right, so there's no rezone or any additional, any additional constraints, if you will. Again, they're by right. One of the things will be that if Tier 3 is chosen, the city will have to show to HCD that this area is ripe, if you will, for mixed-use development. and I don't think that will be an issue considering market forces in Palo Alto at this time.
Are these contiguous?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. They are in between Middlefield and Old Middlefield and Middlefield. In Charleston, excuse me. My mistake. And yeah. And that would give a potential of 195 units if these tier 3 sites are selected. Tier 4 are city-owned surface parking lots. Tier 4, we used California Avenue as, and of those surface parking lots, we chose those parcels that are half an acre or larger. So there would be the 3 parcels along Sherman Avenue. They are zoned PF or public facility, and they have a comprehensive plan designation of MISP. I had that municipal infrastructure special project or something along those lines. But if these sites were chosen, then a rezone would be required and a comprehensive plan amendment would need to be done to allow for residential units. These 3 sites would have a potential of 60 units. And Tier 5, we used University Avenue or downtown surface parking lots. This is the Cowper lot. Again, there are 3 parcels that are greater than half an acre, and they would also require a rezone, but not a comprehensive plan rezone, since the land use is commercial, which already allows. And from these 3 parcels, you would get 37 units. The California Avenue sites were chosen as to help to coincide with the California concept plan, so maybe a little more dovetail with that project. Tier 6 are residentially zoned sites with established uses. This is the Achieve School Middlefield. It is zoned RM30, but as you know, this the school has been in use for a long time. I don't know when it started or it was established, but it has been as part of the community for a long time. Another residentially zoned site in this tier is the YWCA site. It's zoned R1, however, it is over 3 acres. So just on that YWCA owned parcel, we could get approximately 22 to 25 acres. And the last is units, excuse me. It would be great if we could get acres, but units. But the combined total for these 3 parcels in Tier 6 is 68 units. And the last tier is the proposal to increase the capacity on the current housing sites in the 2007 to 2014 housing element. There are 176 sites, and most of those sites were calculated at the default density of 20 units per acre. But in addition, we had some sites that were RM30 or CS, which allows for 30 units per acre. So if we were to increase that yield from 20 to 25 or higher, because I believe there are some RM40 sites, and we would take it up from 30 units to maybe 35 units, just to increase that capacity, if you will. We could increase there are a potential of 358 units if we went by that route. The only issue is, and it's a big issue, is HCD may not accept that higher capacity. Yes, the city has zoned a number of densely higher density projects. 3159 comes to mind. That was at the maximum 30 units per acre. 801 Alma, I believe, is at 53, 54 units using the RT zoning. However, the city, while having approved some higher density units, hasn't really shown a history of that high yield capacity. And that may be a difficult argument to make with HCD. Therefore, here is a summary of all the tiers, and there's our unmet need. So any combination of those tiers to meet the 389 units is part of the interactive tool. To go back, proposing to use tiers 1, 2, and 3, which would give us 401 potential units, which would meet the unmet need. So therefore, let's go and let me take you to the tool real quick.
Yeah, while Tim is pulling up the tool, I just wanted to make one comment, which is what we're not analyzing here is the potential of deleting sites in our current housing element. So if the public and the committee wanted to look at subtracting, then obviously we need to find more units from these ideas or other ideas that come to the fore as we move on.
Okay, and this is an Excel spreadsheet that we will put on the website. Actually, there will be a link to a Dropbox. Instead of downloading the Excel, it'll take you to the city Dropbox account where any member of the public can download this. And of course, the PowerPoint presentation, want to know the basis of this tool, will also be on the website. But if you can see, we start off with the 1778. That is the number of units that are carried over plus the number of units in the pipeline. That adds up to the 1778 plus 41. Those are the units that were generated from sites not on the housing inventory. Gives us a total of 1819. And if you subtract that from the 2189 that we identified as our target, that gives us the 189. Oh, excuse me. The 1988 minus the 1819 gives us the unmet RENA need of 189
380.
units, and 389 if we include the recommended 200 unit surplus. So right now, as it stands, I selected to include Tier 1, the second dwelling units, Tier 2, the Rise site, and Tier 3, which are the San Antonio sites. You can see here on the that we have exceeded the RENA by 232. But let me just go ahead and show you. So if we decided, no, we don't want to include the San Antonio sites, you hit no. And that will remove that amount. Oh. And it shows that we have exceeded our RENA by 37, our 1988 base requirement. We've exceeded it by 37 units, but we're still 163, units short of our overall goal. But if we want to include Tier 5 sites, for example, then we've added additional 37 sites, so we're 74 units above the baseline of 1988, but we're still 126 units of an unmet need if we didn't use our surplus. And you can see on the graph, the red line is our base need, the 1988. And in addition, this green shows you what our target number of 2188. So as you add a tier, so for example, if we add Tier 6, it will also add, you can see from our numbers, it'll add to our numbers, but it'll also add a corresponding block, if you will, showing it as we slowly creep up to meet our need of 2188. So that is the interactive tool. And again, this will be for everyone's consumption, if you will, that the public can go out and look at those sites and see which sites they would prefer.
Let's see, are you finished?
Yeah,
Tim?
sorry, that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. You've given us a lot to think about, and I think we have both lots of questions and comments to make. Might be appropriate at this point, though, to go to the public for their comments. I have 2 cards. If anyone else wants to speak, if you could turn a card to the clerk. First speaker, you have 3 minutes to talk, is Winter Dellenbach.
And depending on how it's counted, 17 units of Buena Vista is at risk. That's a nice little bunch of affordable housing that could be counted against the 25% if given the opportunity. See, my thought is with Buena Vista is that we all know that there is an contract.
Winter, could you turn the mic to you? Make
Sure.
sure it gets picked up.
We all know there's a contract as an option to buy contract, and so that this can only be discussed tangentially amongst yourselves, although, of course, I can talk about it as much as I want.
For 3 minutes.
But as you considered last month, the counting on the 25%, and I think, Tim, you had some considerations about that. A couple of you did. You know, it's not restricted, but it could be. The city hasn't put money into it, but they could. If the opportunity arises. I think the whole thing with Buena Vista is all doors are open and be prepared. Just be prepared. If there is an opening from a lot of different directions, we need to jump, and we need to have ideas, and we need to have flexibility, and it could sure help this out. So it could be good all the way around. You know, Buena Vista is in the housing element, and I do believe that in the text of the housing element, it's noted that it is subject to, possibly subject to closure. I think that's true. But the housing element also says, to the extent feasible, the city will seek appropriate local, state, local, and federal funding to assist in the preservation and maintenance of the existing units at Buena Vista Mobile Home Park. So there is added responsibility to stay open, stay flexible, and be prepared. So I just wanted to leave you with that, and it can help with this. So thanks.
Great, thank you. Next speaker is Herb Borak.
Thank you. There are two overlapping date sequences that I don't understand why they're not the same, and that's the housing element update, which is 2015 to 23, and the housing needs allocation, which is 2014 to 2022. And they're both, state numbers. I don't know why that's the case. You have numbers from ABAG. I see Steve Levy's here, and I don't know if the ABAG numbers have come from him, but I recall, and sometimes in the past, ABAG would have numbers for Palo Alto that would really be the Palo Alto planning area that included Stanford, rather than just the city of Palo Alto, and perhaps they're better now. In regard to the default number of 20 units per acre, that's included in the state law for being able to use sites for cities of Palo Alto's size that are not otherwise indicated in the law, and it's used in our case, on the neighborhood commercial zoning areas where there's 15 units an acre normally, it has to be 20. But it doesn't work in the opposite direction. And the staff report and presentation seem to interchangeably use the words default and practical. I believe for sites like Fry's that are zoned for 30 units per acre, we should remember that our multifamily zoning districts have always been a range of unit densities, which are a larger number of small units or a smaller number of large units. And I believe that we should count it at that higher number of unit density, and that if a site is in the housing inventory, perhaps we should change our zoning law to implement that and to require that higher density. There would be smaller units. There would still be flexibility with the developer because they could always choose to use the housing density bonus law by adding affordable units, and so they could decide whether to use that maximum number and have them bigger, or to use the housing density bonus law and have a larger number of still smaller units. And so I think it's better to use and to require the use of that larger density. I have two concerns, and I don't know whether this is in the state law or it's speculation, but currently we can use part of the units that we had that we didn't take advantage of in the current period of time for this period of time. But the staff report seems to indicate that in the future we may have to add them to the next allocation rather than just using them to satisfy the allocation. So I'm wondering what the state law say about that now. In other words, is the next housing cycle going to work the way this one works? Whereas if we didn't use some of our identified sites, we can use them again, or do we have to do both? Are we required to meet the unmet need from the previous period? Finally, we're carrying over a number of units, but there's no indication in terms of income classification. So does that mean it doesn't matter, which income classes we satisfy, that we can just get the whole number of units and not by income class? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Tom Dubois.
I am one of the people on the working committee. I just wanted to challenge you for a second to maybe rethink the idea of this tier framework. We end up with 35 units downtown near the University train station, about 60 units near the Cal Avenue station. And that just seems kind of crazy to me. I mean, the whole thing about urban planning and our comp plan is to put the high density near our urban centers, near transportation, other resources. So I would suggest maybe thinking about a different framework. Thinking about ending up with maybe 30% of the new housing units near the University station, 30% near the Caltrain station, and then maybe the other 30% in South Palo Alto. The San Antonio lots, I mean, there are less resources there, and it's a little bit harder to get to transportation down there. So just ask you to think about that. That may actually even imply a rebalance of the existing units that we're carrying over. So, I would think we might want to look at that and not just carry over all those units. And then one last thought is if we are going to need to upzone anything, I think some cities have done these overlays where it could remain CN 15, maybe it goes to CN 20 or 30 as long as, half of it's affordable housing, and there's some other constraint to actually get affordable housing. Thanks.
Good, thank you. And our last speaker is Steve Levy.
I want to thank, first of all, Greg for reaching out. We had a very collegial and productive conversation. Before this, I had a question for Tim before I make a huge mistake. Are the existing and pipeline units on the spreadsheet or just the number?
Just the number. The 399 is
Okay.
part of the separate.
I would encourage you, particularly with what Tom just said, of showing those other units, because they're the bulk of the units. So let me follow up why. The ABAC asks you to deal with the income categories, but probably for this process, we also want to think about who are the people who will be living in these units and where they might want to live. Put some specificity on that. We're going to have a very large growth in young and middle-aged seniors and older senior populations, so a lot of the additional housing demand will be for them. They might have different locational preferences than just where our easy vacant parcels are. In particular, a second what Tom said, I would have thought for the people who will be living in these units, that geography was important, and the downtown and the Cal Avenue, particularly downtown where I live, might be a place where the people who we want to house want to live. And that's why I asked where the other units were, because I don't know whether very many of them are downtown. If they're not, then I think this allocation at first glance is a little askew from putting units in the transit corridors, in the walkable neighborhoods, and putting units where the people who are going to be the ones demanding the households want. And so, Director Gittleman, I can't call you Hillary, right? Here? I would encourage the consultant and the whole process not to think about numbers just by income category, but to get into the demographics of who the people are and where they might want to live, and rethink this whole idea of how much can we put in the downtown and in the Cal Avenue or maybe the El Camino area, not simply where we have carryover parcels. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody. Those are the only cards I have. That brings us back to the table.
Thank you. Thank you. There we go. So, a couple things. We were originally up to come with 600 and something units. I forget the number. Yeah. I think going to 389 really changes the whole, at least my thought process on this. I'd say it's become a lot easier. So the first question I have in looking at this, tier 1 units, we're not doing anything, so we can count those units anyway, right? I mean, why would you not count those units?
Yeah, right.
So for practical purposes, shouldn't we really say it's 389 less 32? Because I mean, no one's going to say, let's not count tier 1, right? I mean, why would you not count? Okay, well, maybe. On the tier 2 units, if we went to a couple things, Friars is an interesting site. Weren't we excluded it from the California Avenue concept plan, is that right?
No, it's in the concept plan.
It is in the concept
Yeah.
plan, but we didn't just do a precise plan for that site.
That's right.
Can I clarify? It's in the California Avenue plan, but it was taken out of the PTOD plan. That might be what you're thinking of.
Right, that's right.
Okay.
So, I guess one of the concerns I have is that the Fry site is one of the last large sites we have. It would seem a shame just to zone it for RM30 and have someone build a large apartment or condo complex. So I guess the question is, were we thinking at all of a mixed-use project there? Would at least ground floor? I'm thinking of ground floor retail and stuff like that. We have retail there now. You could create something really attractive, and that's a community asset, as opposed to really losing public access to that site where you just have. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, just to clarify, it's already zoned RM30, so there's no rezoning required, and that's really why it's tier 2. It's low-hanging fruit. There's no zoning change required. But your point is a good one, and that raises this issue of the concept plan that the Planning Commission has now recommended to the council. That concept plan embraces the idea of mixed use on this site. So it may mean that we couldn't get this total number of units on that site.
249. Oh, okay.
You want to comment on that? Or do you think you could get this number of units plus a mix of other uses?
Yeah, I do believe we could embrace some mixed-use development because Right now, if we do 249, that could be only on a portion of the site. It could be. There's a lot of potential there to do a number of different uses.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. You know, one of the things that we have to think about the Prime site is that it could actually turn. Vibrato has bought the site, so there could be some. So we don't want to just. I mean, some of these other sites, you rezone them, and you say to yourself, or we leave the zoning, and you say to yourself, well, you know, we probably have a year or two to rethink this after we get our housing element approved. Not so sure that's true on the Fry site. So I would like to see. I would like to see us seriously think about how we, I guess, forward that process of the Planning Commission looking at the Fry site, coming up with a mixed-use plan, and doing that concurrently and as quickly as possible, frankly, so that we can, because the Fry site drives the whole housing element here. And so I really would like to see it being an interesting mixed-use type project. And you probably need to reach out to the owner as well. I mean, I think that's, I guess there is someone from the owner here. I guess that's important as well. And so in thinking about all of that, I think this is the key project. And I just want to make sure we don't drive it just to a dense residential project. And it's more interesting than that, because I think it's a great site and we could do a lot with it.
Well, one thing maybe we could do is just a little a quick analysis of the capacity of the site vis-a-vis, you know, building out the density in terms of housing, but whether there's room on the site for other things as well. I mean, that's a quick analysis we could try and do for the committee.
Right. Then the other thing is, on the Fry site, it'd be interesting to know what the owner's thinking in terms of product type and all of that. When we talk about Tier 7, which is, you know, increasing the yield, I definitely would agree with some of the speakers that said we could increase the yield on the Fry site. And, you know, I don't know what HCD requires on that, but it may be minimum densities as well. And typically I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of minimum densities, but on the Fry side I might be. It depends on how this all plays out and that, but I think on the Fry site it's special. We could figure that out and get something that makes sense on that. So on Tier 3, it's already zoned this way, but it's not in our housing inventory. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so all you'd have to do then is put it in the housing inventory, and then you get the 195 units, right? I mean, there's no rezoning, there's none of that.
Yeah.
And if you took Tier 2, Tier 1, 2, and 3 gets you there, right? And especially if you got a greater yield out of the Fry site by having that, you could really get there fairly quickly.
Well, Tier 2 has the greater yield in it. So if you're choosing Tier 2, you're getting a greater yield than in the current housing element.
No, I recognize that, but I'm saying a greater yield by, instead of using 20 units per acre and using the 30 units per acre. But if you had a minimum, you could, instead of using, what is it, 67% or something? I didn't do the math. You're not taking 30 units per acre and multiplying it by 12.5.
No.
You're taking less than that.
20.
So if you had a minimum density, you could probably get a bigger number if you need it. I'm not saying we need to. Depends how this plays out, but you could clearly get a bigger number. You know, we've looked at Tier 4, frankly, in this committee before, and Tier 5, and we've rejected it on several occasions. I'm not 100% ready to reject it always, but we've had a strong feeling that we need to preserve those sites for parking and that. And it depends. You know, I still have a hard time imagining how you can take a parking lot, but maybe you can. I mean, I just can't visualize it. How you can take a parking lot, preserve the ability to do all the parking you'd be able to do anyway, add housing which creates more need for parking, and still have the parking capacity. So I view Tier 4, 5 as really, you know, unlikely. Tier 6, there's a lot of established uses that we need, like schools, sites. I mean, I'm not going to, in fact, I think we should take some of those off the housing element possibly. Not that I think we need to do this right now, and it depends where the conversation goes. I mean, one of the things we may do is we may decide that we're going to get this housing element approved and then go look at doing a rebalancing like some of the other speakers talked about. I'm not sure that we probably could have that big conversation, do a large rezonings, and have the community input that it would take to do something significant. I mean, when you have a conversation about rebalancing, I don't know if people realize it, but you're probably talking about exceeding the 60-foot height limit or 50-foot height limit if you're going downtown and you're going on California Avenue to have a major rebalancing near transit. And that's a large community conversation, I think, that takes longer than a year, frankly. So I think that would be probably more ambitious than where I think we should be going in the short run. Let's see. So, depending on where we go with the Fry site, which to me seems to drive all this, it becomes fairly easy to meet those numbers unless you want to have a really ambitious, rebalancing and looking at doing major density changes in the downtown and things like that. Anyway, I'll let someone else go on.
Councilmember Holman.
Yes. So a number of things. Of course, we'll use number one, tier one, the second units, but I think we don't reduce our main number because that's the number we're working with, right? The number of housing units we need to show includes the 32. So we don't reduce the number by 32 just because we're accepting this.
Well, we're using the 32 to meet the
That's
new
what I'm saying.
number, yes.
Yeah.
So that's
So
what
we-
I'm saying, Karen.
So we don't adjust downward the number of units that we need to.
Well, yeah, it's a net.
I'm not explaining it very well. So the number we need to produce is the
389.
389.
389. That number doesn't change. It's just that 32 are a piece of that
Yes.
389. So
Would help
yeah.
meet that 380.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Get to that point.
Exactly. So then the Fry's site. To be perfectly honest, I've been more than frustrated because that's like 3 years plus that's supposed to have been coming to the council. So I've been really frustrated with that and not seeing that. Because as Councilmember Scharf said, what happens there is critical to, this. I'm also interested in a minimum density for a portion of that site. We can't overburden the site, I think, because, we have all kinds of parking and traffic issues. Hopefully not parking issues, but traffic issues. But minimum density and maximum unit size combined, because that maximum unit size also makes them more affordable. Tom Dubois mentioned something about, which I don't think would work at this site, but having an overlay so it's, say, RM15, unless you provide affordable units, then the unit number goes up. So like it goes from RM15 to RM20, say, for instance, if they're affordable units that span the difference. So I think something like that's important. This, the site could be horizontal or vertical mixed use. So I think there's a lot of flexibility. It seems like there'd be a lot of flexibility for here. Again, I haven't seen the concept plan in a very, very long time, so I don't know what the thinking is there. But I think at least a portion of the site could be minimum density, maximum unit size. The San Antonio, number 3, Middlefield to Charleston. It would be really helpful to know what sites those are, because when, a long time ago when we were looking at zoning, not just zoning, but also the housing element, we specifically notched out the Summerwind site because it's thriving retail and we didn't want to encourage them to go away. So we specifically took that out. And so I don't know what site you're looking at now.
Councilman, this is the map. All those sites in yellow are some of the carryover sites. However, they're the darker. Those parcels in green are the proposed San Antonio sites.
So it looks like Summer Winds is included there, and I would absolutely oppose that.
Councilman, could you clarify just?
Well, it looks like that one is Summer Winds, because on the corner there is the filling
one?
station.
That one?
No, the one right there, right there where the little, yeah, right there.
And Summer Winds is a retail?
Yeah, Summer Winds is retail and thriving retail, and I think to try to put something else there by zoning it, just, and it encourages other use to take over, and you displace the use that's there that provides sales tax dollars and actually service and product to the community that we don't otherwise have.
Well, just to clarify, it's already zoned this way. I mean, so we're not proposing to change any zoning. All we're proposing is to take credit for the existing zoning. So if the council's interested in preserving that retail, then there's another conversation we should have outside of this context, because we should talk about whether the existing zoning is appropriate.
We should then, because I maybe have missed a stitch somewhere, because I know when I was on the commission, we took that out of some of the housing discussions because of just what I'm saying now. So maybe I've missed a stitch somewhere and it's changed, but I don't think that's a direction we want to encourage. Same thing with those mixed-use sites along San Antonio. Say, minimum unit size. Maximum unit size and minimum density for not all of it, but for part of it. I think would be appropriate, and again, maybe using the the fluctuating densities might work there as well. What I forgot to mention was about the Fry's site. The reason I think it's good to have the maximum unit size and minimum density there is to hopefully help provide more workforce for that California Avenue business area. Plus, it is near transit, so it seems like that makes sense. I agree with Councilmember Scharf about tiers 4 and 5. I'm not tickled pink with the thought of converting those parking lots. It never has flown very well, and I'm still in that same position as Councilmember Scharf. So I think yeah, the BV site is it is problematic, as Winter Dellenbach spoke. It is problematic for us to talk about that, but whatever staff can propose would be helpful there. And let me make sure I got all my notes here. Sorry, give me just a moment here. Oh, yeah. It's amazing when you do the numbers. I just did a little bit of a reverse math. It's amazing how much the numbers go up when you just change the densities from 20 units to an acre to 30 units to the acre. Even on smallish parcels, it adds up pretty quickly. And not that I'm proposing this, but just say if you go from 20 units to 30 units on the San Antonio parcels, if my math is correct, you go from 195 units to 292 units if you go from 20 units to 30 units to the acre. And that's if my math's right. I think it is. So I'm not proposing that we do that for all of that, but the units grow pretty quickly, really pretty quickly. And the other thing is we might consider doing is in the downtown area, in this downtown area, is look at, again, the minimum density, maximum unit size for mixed-use projects. So if we approve a mixed-use project that is commercial and residential, that those units are smaller and a higher density. I think that's all of my comments.
Let me make one general comment. I'm a little upset that the housing element is coming before our updated comp plan. Puts us in a bit of dilemma of trying to figure out how to relate this to the comp plan. So I think the best thing is first to look backwards. What does our comp plan say? And is what we have in front of us consistent with the comp plan? Comp plan seems to be pretty straightforward about dense housing in the downtown and California Avenue. Policy H3 states, convert sites near transit and other major transportation facilities to higher density residential and mixed use. Policy L9. In the past, we have sought to separate different uses. Now we want to allow a more vital urban environment. Proximity to transit and services makes them excellent locations for both housing and commercial use. Defined transit-oriented residential allows higher residential density in University Avenue downtown and California Avenue community centers within a walkable distance, 2,000 feet, of city's 2 multimodal transit stations. Now, that dates from 1998. Maybe we don't go along with that anymore. But there have been 2 meetings in recent years where the council, talking about the 2014 housing element, addressed the issues of where should they be. First council vote on May 12th of 2010 suggested looking at dense residential buildings within a quarter-mile of transit services, even thinking of exceeding the 50-foot height limit for purposes of meeting the housing element. On June 23rd of 2010, there was another meeting about the housing element, and they came away with a council recommendation, a council motion that stated, add preparation of a South El Camino area concept plan that restricts rezoning for residential intensities until that concept plan is approved. Now, that seems to deal directly with what we have in our 14 housing element in our recommendation to continue, and especially Tier 6, which said, let's increase densities. Now, it's possible these are all out of date. We have new circumstances. But if we pass the housing element units as described, it means we have to throw out 2 critical elements of our comp plan. One, that the downtown and the California Avenue are to be mixed-use centers with dense residential housing in it. We have to say, no, you're wrong. We've changed our mind. And 2, the comp plan elements that talk about housing, that say each residential neighborhood shall have access to civic and community centers and things like schools. South El Camino makes me scratch my head and say, is that the site where we want to put people? Are we creating a division in town between a rich business district and the place where young and old are gathered, which seems to break what the comp plan has told us from the past, in which the council, when they have done updates, have dealt with it. As a matter of fact, one of the clear mandates from the council was when we deal with building along El Camino or anywhere else for dense housing, we should use the lead neighborhood development principles. That's a very powerful and important statement. Now, maybe that's something else we want to reject. But I know we have a need to identify housing sites. We need to do it in a rapid manner. We have tables in front of us that help us get started. But I think up front, we need to make some determinations about what this city is going to be, whether we want to be consistent with our old comp plan or whether we want to redefine it. we want to redefine it, maybe Monday night when we discuss the comp plan, we can talk about that. But this housing element has to be consistent with comp plan goals, and we need to settle that up front. So my question is, are we? And what kinds of changes or adaptations do we need to make it consistent with the comp plan that we have and with the updates the council over time has added? Latest update was January 2013, where they integrated the vision statement T1 from that into our comp plan, which says we should have dynamic, vibrant, mixed-use downtown centers.
I'm sorry, was that January 2012 or 2013?
2013, I think, is when we did it.
And then it was August 2013 that the housing element was adopted. So that action, the council's action to adopt the housing element, was your last comprehensive plan amendment. And so in making that amendment, you were making a change to the existing comprehensive plan and maintaining its internal consistency. So I just want to clarify, the existing housing element by council's action is part of the comprehensive plan and consistent. Internally, the comprehensive plan is internally consistent with that housing element. And so there may be policies that direct mixed use, intense development to transit centers in downtown Cal Ave. There are also policies around the South El Camino corridor, and there is zoning to implement the current comprehensive plan that includes these sites that have been identified in the housing inventory. So I don't want to suggest that.
We are talking now about the new housing element, not the old one, but we are integrating the unused sites into the new housing element and into our updated comp plan context.
Well, again, I think we're talking about counting sites that are already identified in our housing element, i.e. in our comp plan, to achieve our state mandated goal. And we're talking about, at least if you accept the staff's recommendation in tier 1, 2, and 3, we're talking about using sites that are already zoned for the uses that we would count them for. And therefore, they have zoning that's already been put in place consistent with the existing comp plan.
Right.
So we would not, if we chose 1, 2, and 3 tiers, we wouldn't have a question about comp plan consistency. We might want to think about policies and programs to encourage more of the development to shift elsewhere, and we can analyze those issues. But
I think there's a broad range of policies that are affected by this. Where do we spend our infrastructure funds? What do we do about the school site that exists in a place where there are few elementary schools? What do we do about densities, and how do we deal with densities? There are issues of traffic. There's a whole slew of policy choices that the council face, and one of those questions is, in the composition of our housing site inventory, it has implications and impacts for those other policies. The comp plan update should help us think about those coincidences, and we have not done that yet. And I think it's appropriate that at some point we confront that issue. And I think the earlier we do it in the process, the earlier the Planning Commission does it, the earlier the Citizens Commission does it, the better off we will be. So those are my recommendations.
So I'd like a follow-up to that.
Yeah, please.
So I think, Councilmember Schmidt, I just wanted to try and follow what you were saying there. It strikes me as there's several important points. If you just go with tier 1, 2, and 3, we are completely within the comprehensive plan because the existing zoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And so therefore, we're not changing anything, and therefore we're actually doing what you already wanted to do. There are a number of policies within the existing comprehensive plan, which you raise, which is putting dense housing basically in the downtown business California area. And what I was unclear of is, it seemed to me that we're going through that process by updating the comprehensive plan. And that's when we deal with those policy issues. And so if we do the tier 1, 2, and 3 as it is, we're actually consistent with the existing comprehensive plan. And then those policy issues that you raised are all for the comprehensive plan discussion. Unless you're actually advocating that right now we say, no, let's go and exceed the 50-foot height limit, and let's build dense housing, and you advocate for that on both downtown and California Avenue. Now that might, and I guess that's really what I'm asking you. Are you saying that we need to rethink this right now and say, let's not do what we're doing, which is completely within the comprehensive plan, and let's actually take the policies that may not have been implemented in the comprehensive plan, which is creating dense housing downtown, which would require abandonment of the 50-foot, as you said, of the 50-foot limit in the downtown and California Avenue. And is that what you're advocating the committee does? I mean, is that where you're heading on this, or is this just questions?
I think in the short run, it would be helpful if the interactive model showed the location of the housing inventory sites by neighborhood. So, my hand count says that 8.6% of the housing sites in the 2014 plan are in the downtown. Now, our comp plan mentions, I've cited at least 5 places where it says this is a good place for dense housing. And we have 8.6% of our housing sites there. And it probably would be less after these.
I'm sorry, just for clarification, 8% of the sites or of the units?
Of the units.
Okay.
Sorry.
But Councilmember Schmidt, the floor. So I guess the question I had then is, that's all useful information, but if you look at the downtown, it's not like there's vast swaths of land available. So the question is, if you want to do that now, to what end? Do you want to rezone? And, to me, it seems there's only one way to go if you're going to do that. And if you're going to change that balance in any appreciable amount, you have to go up. And so, we have limited time and limited process here. And, I mean, if you're advocating that we do that, that we say, let's rezone for 30%, and we want Hillary to come back to us and say, what would that look like in the downtown? That would look like, are we having, 10-story buildings like they're doing in Redwood City? Or are we, what does that mean for Palo Alto, and what does that look like? And if you're advocating that, then, that's a legitimate question and we should look at it. But I'm not sure what the point is of saying there's only 8%, unless you're going to say it's worthwhile to look at how would we rebalance that. And do you want to look at that rebalancing now, or do you want to wait and look at it at the comprehensive plan? That's really what I'm asking you.
I think it is appropriate to look at it now because this is our opportunity. The council asked in 2006 for an update in the comp plan built around concept areas. The council voted money in 2008 and was promised that by 2010 we'd have an updated comp plan. We don't have it. In 2010, we had another meeting and were promised that we'd have an updated comp plan in 2012. It's now 2014, and they're saying in 2 years we'll have a comp plan. Here is an impact of not having that discussion, and it is an appropriate time, at least, to address the issue. And if we want to say, let's go ahead, fine. But to say we don't have the proper information, let's wait 2 years and keep making these piecemeal decisions that are forming our future community. I think this is one of the few opportunities we have to say, what are we doing?
But what decision is that, Councilmember Schmidt? Is it?
You raise the issue. Should we look at the downtown, the California Avenue, say, what sites are there? What does it entail? What does it involve? And make a decision.
Can I make a suggestion? I mean, it sounds like one of the members of the public asked for this, and the chair is asking for an analysis of the sites and where they are by neighborhood. Why don't we bring that to the committee at the next meeting? It seems to me that if the committee wants to look at either subtracting some of the existing sites or putting any of the new sites downtown, then what we're really doing is saying we want to go towards the parking lots and other low-hanging fruit in downtown, because we don't have time between now and January to do height change and identify. I mean, there just aren't a lot of other available sites in downtown and Cal Ave. So it would be information that we could use to start moving the conversation towards tier. What is it? 4 and 5.
4 and 5.
4 and 5.
So I would not support that. I mean, I don't know if Councilmember Holman would, but I would not. I think that you're actually doing what Councilmember Schmidt says he doesn't want to do. I think you're doing the opposite. I think that you are looking at stuff that primarily belongs in the discussion of the comprehensive plan. And yes, I'm equally frustrated that we haven't had the comprehensive plan discussion. I mean, I completely agree with you on that. But I don't think the appropriate thing to do now is to say, let's look at these other issues when we don't have time for it, frankly. And it would be piecemealing it. I think we need to have a comprehensive discussion and a community discussion before we launch into, what would really be a radical revision of what we've been doing as a community. And right now, tier 1, 2, and 3, all is within the comprehensive plan and the existing zoning. And I see no point in, frankly, coming up with a list of where all the different housing sites are and say there's 8% downtown for this purpose. I think that's an excellent thing to do for the comprehensive plan discussion, and I'd like to see that as part of the broader comprehensive plan when we discuss it. I just think it's piecemealing it out to do it in this committee, and that's really what you've been accusing staff of actually doing, and that's what we'd be doing at that point. Whereas if we look at it, the comprehensive plan, we wouldn't be.
Okay, I will make a motion that we follow the director's guidelines and add to next time's agenda an item to discuss the context of our decision making. Councilmember Holt.
I guess I'm not quite sure specifically what that motion means.
I think it means we look at tiers 4, 5, and 6.
Well, that's what I want the maker of the motion to state.
Well, I think
Specifically, it does mean.
I think the director said 4 and 5, certainly.
I couldn't support that, sorry.
Okay. Let's turn to school board member Tom.
Thank you. I apologize if my questions are sort of basic, because I'm new to a lot of this. I just wanted to follow up on your question, Councilmember Holman, about perhaps higher densities in some places could make sense, and it adds a lot of units. Is that something that you would also apply to looking at some of the carryover units, perhaps, looking at whether any of those could be increased in density?
I think for me personally, I think what Councilmember Schmidt or Chair Schmidt did raise is having those on a map for us to consider would be helpful. Because just as a blanket statement, I couldn't say yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, but to take a look and see whether any would be appropriate.
Yeah, and
Not just the new locations.
right.
And I should clarify, we do have a map that's integrated with the spreadsheet tool. It's just that it's a big GIS map, so it's actually
Throughout the city.
yeah, it's hard to get it to a scale where it's meaningful on a screen, but it'll be on the website with the tool, so people can look at it, and we can try and come up with a graphical representation for the next committee meeting that's a little clearer.
And then the next thing is I don't fully understand how that table that shows the distribution of units based on income level. I don't understand how that really plays out in the rest of this planning, because it's divided by those different income levels, but it's not. I don't know how the carryover units distribute into that, nor how these new proposed units, possible units, satisfy that.
That's a good question. I'll take a stab at this, and maybe Tim can add on. Some of the units that we include in our housing element, like the second units and units in the pipeline, we're probably going to have to count as moderate or above moderate. But any sites that have densities of 20 units to the acre or more, we can count those as low or very low income, just because they meet this quote default density that the state has articulated. Even though they might not build out that way, but we can count those in those categories. Anything else?
Yeah. The default density of 20 units per acre, the state assumes that at that default density, there's a higher chance of affordable housing being built at those densities versus 20 or below.
I mean, so it sounds given the carryover units and the ones you're planning, I don't hear any concern that you'll have difficulty meeting that distribution based on income.
That is correct. We believe we have enough sites that have densities of 20 plus per acre to satisfy our low and very low needs.
Commission Member Michaels.
So thank you. So earlier it was asked if the PTC was ready to step up with respect to the timeline in terms of our review, and just wanted to provide the assurance that we're conscious of that and it's on our calendar and we will make that our priority. There have been a number of comments, particularly from Chair Schmidt, about the frustration about updating the overall comp plan, which I think is a frustration that's shared by many. And it seems to me unwieldy to in the process that Palo Alto uses to update the entire comp plan, which is why it's taking 8 years instead of 1 year. I think that we're in this cycle and we now have a plan to update the comp plan with the Our Palo Alto community engagement, and that is definitely the way to proceed now. But I think next time around there might be some thinking about doing it differently. And I think that the example of how much effort is required just to update the housing element takes a full year. Perhaps the council might want to, at least in draft form, take up a update of each of the 7 elements of the comp plan, maybe 1 per year, with the EIR process being done when all the cycle is completed. That may be impracticable, but it seems to me that you need to make it digestible to keep it fresh. Just a few comments on the spreadsheet. The way it was demonstrated, when you went through the different tiers, you had sort of yes, and it produced a number, you had no, it zeroed it out. If you made that more dynamic in terms of having a percentage, 100%, 0%, 80%, then you might have a better tool. And that might lead to some what-if considerations with the tool. If you wanted to utilize, you have multiple tiers, and let's say you wanted to prioritize most at the tiers which make the most sense in relationship to the comp plan policies and so forth, and tiers that are more marginal or more, or less practical to build out, you might have sort of a lower percentage but not zero. So if you had that sort of a dynamic in the spreadsheet formulas, you might actually find it works better. The other is Councilmember Scharf raised the issue that there might be a much longer conversation if one were to take a look at the height limit, and I think that this is something which plays into density. But I think if you look at the neighborhoods where the policy supports development of mixed use, maybe vertical mixed use, and now with the current height limit, you basically have a 4-story cap as a practical matter. I think the idea of allowing an additional story, going from 4 stories to 5 stories, would give a lot of flexibility or latitude if you wanted to concentrate more in the walkable, vibrant neighborhoods closer to downtown or California Avenue, or even along the El Camino corridor where you have transit and so forth. On the walkable neighborhoods, one of the questions I have, and I don't know that this is fully ripe in this cycle, but I think that you've got in the business and economics element of the comprehensive plan, you've got discussions of the downtown and California Avenue, but you have then the the other neighborhood shopping centers like Midtown and Charleston Center and Alamo Plaza and so forth, you might want to consider what, if any, change of density you have around Midtown and Charleston Center to make those also walkable neighborhoods, and that might actually alleviate some of the concern of having development in San Antonio kind of out far away from anything that would support grocery stores or other services that the residents would want. On the use of second units, noting the particular requirements in the law and in the ordinance about what these second units have to be configured. There is some number of houses in Palo Alto each year which are where the existing structure is raised and then a new house is built, maybe with a basement. Oftentimes you can have an in-law unit in the basement, or it's not a separate dwelling in the side yard or the backyard. But what if you had your in-law unit as part of the single structure, but you had access, separate kitchen, other aspects of the house made it a legitimate in-law unit or rental unit or what have you. I think there's some controversy about what might happen to surface parking lots in downtown and California Avenue, and certainly in the draft of the comp plan that the council will see in due course, and we'll have great fun with that. It looks like on this plan it's sort of all or nothing. You've got a surface lot, get rid of it, put something else into place. And I think, again, you want a more dynamic kind of possibility that, for example, in California Avenue, where you've got 3 surface lots, I think J. Paul came back with some proposal early on in its doomed process that they had 1 parking structure, 1 housing development, and 1 new park. So mixing up a bit so that you provide some amenities as well as not sort of exacerbating the supply and demand issues relative to parking might be something that I didn't see in this first cut of the tool. And then the other thing is that there's a tremendous amount of important focus on providing affordable housing. There's a different problem which is maybe not nearly so urgent in Palo Alto, and that's you've got many affluent empty nest and aging occupants of large homes that would like to downsize, but there's very little inventory of affluent downsizing available in Palo Alto. So essentially, if you have a 3,000 square foot, 4,000 square foot, 5,000 square foot house that you raised your family and kids in Palo Alto, and now it's an empty nest and it's time to move on, there's a large cohort that may have to move out. And I think that that may be how it is, but I think in the housing element you might want to contemplate the possibility of some units that would be attractive for these people who want to downsize but remain in Palo Alto.
I'd like a follow-up to the comments.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that could get lost in this, and I'm really glad you raised it. Councilmember Holman mentioned several times having smaller units with, more units and smaller units, basically, if I'm not mischaracterizing. I'm a big proponent of micro units. I just don't think you want to make it everywhere, and I think they have to be rental, frankly. I think that you can't have for sale micro units. I don't think that makes sense. But I also think you need to think clearly about having some nice units, some larger units in which people could sell their single-family home in Palo Alto, move to the downtown, and live there. And we're talking, 3-bedroom units probably, because no one's going to move out of their, 4-bedroom home and move into a really small micro unit of 600 square feet. It's not going to happen, frankly, or even a 900 square foot unit. So I think you're absolutely correct on that. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that our comp plan does talk about a variety of housing types. And so we want to make sure that we actually do provide a variety of housing types and allow people the options to do that kind of stuff. And I do think we actually, whereas affordable housing is very important, and that's really what people talk about when driving the housing element, because that's what HCD is really focused on, as a community, we want to have a variety of housing types, and I think you're absolutely correct on that.
Ask the director, are you looking for a motion from the committee?
No, this was just the beginning of the conversation. We appreciate the input we've received on the tool, and we'll go to spreadsheet tool 2.0 when we can. And our thought is that at your next meeting, we would continue this discussion about sites and start to look at some of the program and policy language in the plan. So some of these thoughts that we're sharing about the mix of unit types, minimum unit counts required when these sites develop, we can discuss those in that context.
Good. So this is just an introduction.
That's right.
Councilmember Holman?
Yeah, a couple of things. Let me get one just piece of business off the plate first. In the minutes that were given to us, there's a correction that needs to be made on the last page, where it says Councilmember Holman noted the community did not support granny units at a Planning and Transportation Commission meeting held. Actually, that should be deleted. It should read did not support granny units during consideration a few years earlier. Page is that here? It's the last page. It's right here.
13.
So did not support granny units during consideration a few years earlier. So that's a correction to minutes. Then last time we met, I think there was going to be some discussion with Palo Alto Housing Corp, for instance, to talk about, this goes to existing units, to talk about what units might be threatened that already exist in the community. And so that was one piece of it, and then the other piece of it was very tangential, very much related to that, was as we've had our inclusionary housing laws for a long time, and also because we started building affordable housing here a long time, is some of that construction coming to the end of its life. So how much of that might we be able to capture in our housing element? What did that discussion or those discussions happen with the Housing Corp, for instance?
The discussions that happened informally, and I think I told the committee that I would send a formal letter to see if we'd get a different answer if we asked in writing, and I haven't done that, but I will do that. Again, we really just don't think there are a lot of units here that the Palo Alto Housing Corp tends to continuously update the restrictions so they don't expire. I don't know about our inclusionary units, but maybe.
In regards to our BMR ownership units, if they are, very few are nearing their terms, because when units get resold, the 59-year restriction starts again. So it's a rolling restriction on those BMR units. Therefore, very few are.
And the rental units, we all know about the lawsuits, so we can't require new ones, but those existing rental units, can we continue to roll those? Does the lawsuit affect lawsuits? Do they affect our existing rental units, inclusionary units?
Well, I don't believe there are any BMR rental units that are ending its term, but I will double check on those.
Yeah, I'd feel better if there was a conversation with the Housing Corp that's a formal conversation, and I'd feel better about it that way.
If I could just, the last housing element did have a note on the Terman apartments, said they were the only units at risk. So you might address that.
Additional research has been done on Terman, since the city does not have a relationship, if you will, with the Terman apartments. Documentation was a little harder to get, but we have. I have a copy of the regulatory agreement, and their affordability will end in October of 2024.
Yeah. Understanding that and remembering that, but still, I think if we could have a conversation with the Housing Corp, that'd be great. Then this comes up fairly often, and the council did in, it was 2012, I guess it was. The conversation, as I'm recalling it, and I'm pretty sure this is it, was to consider increasing the 50-foot height limit in the California Avenue and California and downtown areas. It was consider for housing. We haven't gotten any kind of report back on that. And then the other thing that's related to that is the FAR in, let's just say downtown, since we had a discussion about downtown and more housing, the FAR there is 1-to-1. So to get to, up to a 3-to-1, you have to use TDRs or exceptions or density bonus law or something of that nature. So it seems to me that rather than just allowing a 3-to-1 FAR with the use of, let's say, TDRs, for instance, why don't we require, if there's a 4-story building, to require a 4th story to be housing? That's a way to get housing downtown, and it's a way not to exceed the 50-foot height limit, and it accomplishes all kinds of things. So why don't we look at that as well, instead of just, okay, 3-to-1, 1-floor retail, 3 stories of commercial, which has other impacts.
That's a really creative idea, and when we start talking about policies and programs, that would be a great time to raise that, and we'll try and get that in the, see if there's a place to hang that in the revisions to the housing element.
Okay, great. And yeah, I would really appreciate that, and I think, frankly, the community might too. I haven't raised that with anybody in the community yet, but I think it's something we really should look at. And we're not taking anything away, really. We're still allowing the same amount of square footage, and they have to buy something to get there anyway. So anyway, I think those are, I have all these notes I write. Thank you, Commissioner Michael. You brought up lots of different points, and I appreciate all the things that you did bring up. So, okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, let me finish with a couple questions. I guess it would be helpful to have, the council did ask that the lead neighborhood development be a part of any dense housing development, so you might come back and respond to that next time. You do mention that the housing.
I'm sorry, Chair Schmidt. Can we just clarify what you meant by that? Neither of us is clear what you're asking.
I am referring to the June 23rd, 2010 council motion that was passed that said we would use lead ND principles on dense housing and the housing element.
Okay.
So you might just refer to that,
okay,
that from the minutes.
Okay, and you don't believe that was reflected in the housing element that followed that motion?
I don't think so.
Okay. Okay.
And then the if you could also respond to the South El Camino concept plan mandate that the council passed.
I think we'll be talking about that on Monday in the context of the comp plan discussion. Okay.
Now, the last thing is you said one of the items on today's agenda was the housing needs assessment update. I don't see anything, but I know that background material is important, and just wondered when we might see some of the background demographic information.
Yes, in the staff report on this item about sites, we had a little explanation of the way we're approaching the housing needs assessment. ABAG has forwarded to all the jurisdictions in the Bay Area a data set that we're going to be able to draw on for the housing needs assessment. I know Stephen Levy has offered to help as well, supplement that. So our consultant is tasked with coming up with a draft of that information, and the committee will be receiving it. I don't know if it'll be at your next meeting or the following meeting, but in short order.
Okay, yeah, because it was on today's agenda, I just wanted to make sure we didn't.
Yeah, no, it's just a short explanation of how we're approaching that subject.
Okay, those are the questions I have. Anything else from any of the members?
Yeah, I did have something.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Councilmember Schmidt does make a good point on this. He pointed out to me that actually I'm seconded. There's a Councilmember Klein moved, seconded by Councilmember Scharf, to develop a policy for inclusion in the comprehensive plan supporting preparation of a South El Camino Real concept plan from Charleston to South San Antonio portion of El Camino Real at a later date, and that restricts rezoning for residential intensification unless the concept plan is approved. Approximate consultant cost for preparing the concept plan was estimated $135K, and that was in 2010. One of the great things about having a new planning director is you don't have to take any ownership for the fact that clearly someone dropped the ball on this and never moved it forward.
I don't know. I don't want to take ownership of it, of course, but I do want to respond. And I actually sent an email to Councilmember Schmidt earlier today, and I'm sure you didn't get it. Was just before the meeting because he had raised this issue with me earlier, and we can talk about this more on Monday. But if I read that motion, it's asking that we put a policy in the comprehensive plan that would require development of a concept plan for the South El Camino corridor after the comp plan is adopted.
I actually believe you're reading it incorrectly.
Really?
Yes.
It says no dense development.
Well, what it does is it implies is that you will hire a consultant, right, which the question is, was that done? We were going to spend $135,000.
I'm sorry. There was,
and that the consultant was going to go
find my
ahead
email.
and develop a policy for inclusion in the comprehensive plan. And so the question is, was the consultant hired? Was a policy developed that we would then be able to put in the comprehensive plan or not? My belief is it was not done because I've never seen it. But I could be wrong. You guys could have this policy and have hired a consultant and it be there, but I'm assuming it hasn't. If it has, say so. And so if it has, go ahead, tell me if it has. We don't know. I'm assuming it hasn't.
There is a policy in the revisions that the Planning Commission has prepared calling for development of this concept plan.
We hire a consultant to do that.
I believe the decision by the council, maybe it was subsequent to the minutes that you're looking at, was that we would defer actually developing the concept plan until after the comprehensive plan was adopted, and we were not going to expend those resources until we prepared the plan.
So that's all fine. So I guess where I'm going with this and where I was thinking about it is it would be a really good idea when these council motions are made if there was a way to track them. And I think that's what this comes up because then it gets rid of confusion. You don't have Councilmember Schmidt emailing you about something that occurred in 2010, and there may very well be subsequent, as you said, motions that occurred, but we don't know if they were or we don't know. And frankly, you're going to make this representation. I'm not going to track it. I'm not going to go back and look and say, yes, there was a council meeting that then did this or not. So I think we really do need a system that says, this is the council motion, and this is what happened to it. And I think especially in land use issues, because otherwise it gets really confusing. And it'd be great for you. You'd be able to say, here's the diagram. Yes, we had this thing where we overturned this, we did that, and this is where we are on it.
We'd be happy to continue this discussion with the council, as I'm sure we will, on Monday evening. I just wanted to say one thing in defense of long and winding planning processes. There have been a few other things going on in the world since 2006, including a Great Recession and a faster recovery than any of us anticipated. So there are reasons, I think, that this has taken a long time, and I hope we can focus on what an opportunity we have ahead of us to use the final stretch of this process to try and bring people together and really come up with a plan that we all like.
So no question, I would completely agree with that. But it's always easy to make excuses on things, and the notion that there was a lot going on. Well, there's always been a lot going on, and if council makes a motion, it should be implemented.
I understand.
Or it should be told not to be implemented. And what's really sometimes difficult in this organization, and I think it goes more than planning, is that there needs to be a focus on the nuts and bolts of things. And the nuts and bolts means having good processes that track these things and make sure everyone's on the same page. Because there may be a lot of reasons times when council makes a motion and things change, and at which point you should come back to us and say, hey, we don't really think we should do this because, these circumstances have changed. Instead of, I think sometimes what happens is there's a press of business, and a press of business causes it not to happen. And I'm enjoying my soapbox for a moment. And because it's actually a really important point. And one of the things I notice in organizations sometimes is that everyone has so much to do, and it's so hard to get everything done that you react to the immediacy, and therefore no one gets trained on creating a process. And if you do that, you end up with what I guess when they do what our auditor called an immature organization. And so what I think we all want to move towards is where everyone can track this and look at it. Sorry.
To be continued.
Yeah.
Well,
I won't take as much time on the soapbox, but Councilmember Scharf is talking about something I've been thinking a lot about lately and haven't mentioned to anybody yet, but it goes back to something that has been discussed quite a bit, and that's a work plan, because what does happen, well, I think what is good and appropriate, and this is beyond your scope, but you'll be a piece of it, I hope, is to have the motions captured and posted, because otherwise you have to look through all of the minutes, and we don't have a good way currently of even being able to find when X item went before the council, because everything is listed by date. And it's a horrible way to try to find anything. It's horrible, and I've asked about that a few times. But I think, as Councilmember Scharf is saying, if we could have motions tracked and by category, and there'll be some crossover, that would be great. And what does happen is that feeds into this immature organization thinking that, and comment that the auditor's office made, is we have a lot of things that fall into a void, or a number of voids. And so they just don't happen, or we don't know how to track them. We don't know where they are. We don't know what stage they're in, if staff's working on them or not. If other things have interceded, then it's great for us to know that. Because this isn't about beating staff up. It's about actually being partners in how we get things done, along with the public and keeping people informed. So, you know, and it's the council. I'm almost done. And and then working together so that we can prioritize. So, you know, it shouldn't be put to staff either for staff to prioritize what happens next. So anyway, I'll have
Yeah,
share.
I guess I don't want to stray too far from housing mandates to council procedures.
And I just want to point out that your soapbox is as big as mine.
Okay.
Let me make one last comment. I did get a note from Councilmember Price, who was not able to come, and she said that she was in support of items 1 through 5. She had comments on them, but I guess can make them at a later time. But wanted to make sure that she was included in supporting those. Okay, if there's no other comments, I want to thank everybody for their participation today and for getting a good ways down the road. So let's move on to the last couple items.
Wait, there's more?
It's just comments, I think, from the director
I have nothing to add.
and future meetings.
I think, as we discussed at our next meeting, we're going to continue the discussion of sites, and we're going to begin the discussion of policies and programs. In addition, we promise to bring back to you, if we can, a little fit study for the Fry's site, just to demonstrate the Tier 2 proposal that we talked about today.
Great. Thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned.